Okay, recording started. So hello, welcome on yet another AsyncAPI public meeting. I'm Łukasz, and again, surprised. There are a few new names that at least I've never seen before on the meeting. So we have a few items on the agenda, but before we jump into those items, I guess that's a few people, the people that are on the call for the first time. Maybe you'd like to introduce yourself, say something why you joined the call. Of course, it's not that you have to do it. You just have an opportunity to introduce yourself to the group. So anyone would like to? Don't be shy.
Yes, well, good morning. It's Juan Ore.
Hi, Juan.
How are you? I was following the Async API. I subscribed to the emails. I was following for different reasons. I was a couple of software that mentioned Async API. And as I progress in my projects for building APIs, I start seeing more the name of Async API. So now I try to attend more frequently to the presentations and get up to date on what's coming on.
Awesome, that sounds great, especially when you say that you now see that people talk more about AsyncAPI, you hear more about it, so it's awesome. Thank you.
We're making some noise, apparently.
Yeah, welcome. Anyone else?
Welcome, by the way. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
So anybody, anyone else, or shall we start? Okay, perfect. So before I jump into the agenda items, let me start something that some time ago somebody asked me if we warn people about it. I said we never did it, but maybe let's start doing it. So I just want to inform you that this call is recorded because it's a public call. There are many different people from different companies. So be aware it's recorded and we're going to share it on YouTube. And yeah, YouTube, and your names will be visible. So if you're not into this and you're not happy with it, then we cannot really change it. So please just accept it, or you're gonna have to leave the meeting. So be aware that call is monitored. And yeah, let me jump into or maybe I will not display the agenda items. I will just discuss them briefly, and I just don't think it's relevant to show the list. So first of all, the first item. Can you hear my dog? Okay, it's like the meeting started. So the first item on the agenda is the update from Dale on all the activities that he took over the last couple of weeks to improve the AsyncAPI and Kafka and its support for Kafka. So that will be the first topic. Dale wants to give an update on it because there were a few PRs opened. So Dale, do you want to show your screen, or should I? Because I can give you a co-host if you want. We cannot hear you.
Yeah, I can share my screen. That'd be good.
Okay, then just give me a sec. Okay, you're a co-host now, so you should be able to show your screen.
Right. Okay. Yeah, I'll do a quick sort of run through of what I've been up to, sort of share how far it's got, and hopefully sort of invite people to after this go and add their own feedback, because all of this is a work in progress. At a high level, what I'm trying to get to is to the point where everything you need to know to be able to write your Kafka application to consume from a topic is captured in the spec. So you don't need to go and find any out-of-band information. And the two areas I've been looking at is the way that schemas are used, because that has a big influence on how you need to, the shape of the data on the topic tells you how you need to consume it, and security, how to connect to the cluster at all. So there is a PR open for both of these. For the schema one, the way I approached it was essentially working backwards from examples. So I described, for different types, different scenarios, different ways that data will have made its way into the topic, what code you would need to write to be able to consume that, and then how we could describe that in the spec. And then I did that for, it's not every possible scenario, but enough I thought to help explore what things we need in the spec. So I sort of illustrated a dozen different scenarios of this kind of spec could turn into this kind of code, so that to get to the spec to the point where it's expressive enough to cover all the different options we need. So there's a PR with what I think would be needed to enable that. There's a couple of sort of open questions on it. So I think it's getting closer to what we need. So I'm sort of waiting for replies from Lauren and Fran. But like I say, definitely feedback is welcome. It's sort of there as a conversation starter to sort of see what people think. So that's around schemas and how we describe the data that's on the topic. The other one is about security and how we connect to the cluster. So and I worked, Nick Townsend in particular was quite helpful. What we came up with was basically for all the different security options that Kafka would require that you would need to put in your application to connect to a cluster, how would we describe that in AsyncAPI? So we ended up putting it, after some feedback I got from my first PR, we ended up using the approach of putting it all into the protocol and the security scheme, so that a combination of these two values would be enough to cover all the different permutations of Kafka security parameters that we'd need. So that's in a pull request in the AsyncAPI repo. And actually, I see that Nick Nick and Sergio have been discussing that. I hadn't actually seen these comments, so I need to go and have a look. But again, more comments definitely welcome. The main driving factor here is, what do we need to make the spec expressive enough that you know how to write your application to start consuming? I think that sort of covers everything. I just wanted to share, like I say, what I'm up to and what the progress is, and show people where they can go and add their own comments to it.
Thanks a lot, Dale. That's a lot of stuff, and this table is impressive with those security schemes. So it's a lot of work. Anyone has something to add here, or rather prefers to have some time to get familiarized with the PRs?
Can I ask a question? Sorry, I mean, I did introduce myself a couple of weeks ago, but probably you've all forgotten who I am already. My name's Ian Cooper, and I work for Just Eat Takeaway. And I've been looking at bindings, and also we use SNS and SQS and how that works, and Rabbit, etc. as well. One of the things that interests me is, what do we think should go into a binding? So when I think about a binding for a declarative endpoint for describing a messaging endpoint, I can understand that my binding would include information, for example, around, say, the topic, and maybe Kafka features like the replication factor, etc. But do we think really we would be putting, no offense, I'm just trying to understand what the scope is, information around how you connect to the broker in the AsyncAPI definition of the endpoint? Is it because we want to document some facts about the broker that says, hey, if you want to talk to Confluent, you're going to need basically a username and a password under SASL, maybe expose your, SASL certificate authority, because depending on what platform you're on, etc. What do we think a binding covers? Because that feels to me like that's information about how I connect to a broker, which will vary by vendor, for example. I mean, exactly what protocols are supported or whether you're running it in-house, etc. Whereas binding information feels more like, to me, I want to generate this particular topic or whatever. What are the factors that vary about that topic? I don't know what is the scope of a binding, just for clarity, I think, because I'm trying to understand how that works.
So that's a great question, and it's actually a recurring question. I think we have to clarify at some point in the spec. So the scope of a binding is actually to describe whatever you'll need to connect and to send or receive messages to an endpoint from an endpoint, right? So if you're tempted to put some stuff there that is to configure, for instance, Kafka or SNS or to deploy infrastructure or something like this, then this is going beyond the purpose of bindings, right? Like so it's purely the necessary stuff that you will need to connect and consume or produce messages. I mean, I will say that the API interface, right? The API layer, right? So it's actually just the API layer. So it's security. It can be, I don't know, encryption. It can be where to find, where to connect to in order to consume or to publish. And when I say where, it can be URL or it can be a specific queue, maybe the name of the queue, because you have the channel name, but you don't have the name of the queue. So maybe it's needed. Yeah, this kind of stuff. And if you're thinking about, for instance, replication factor, for instance, in the case of Kafka, yeah, and I don't think it will go there, because that's not something that you need in order to send messages or to consume messages, right? Otherwise, we'll end up creating a huge beast, right? Where we list all the possibilities on how to configure infrastructure, right? And
yeah, I mean, it's interesting because you might say, well, if I wanted to do, so one of our goals, for example, is to take an AsyncAPI template, use it to generate basically a Terraform from it, and use the Terraform, for example, to declare our topics, right, in infrastructure. To do that, obviously, I need to understand things like the replication factor. Now, I could put that information out of bounds somewhere else, but is that then part of the binding? If I want to generate that in order to create a topic, I mean, Kafka will refuse to let me generate a topic if I don't tell it effectively, you know, kind of what the replication factor is, for example. So is that part of the scope of a binding?
It's not part of the scope of the binding, but you could create an extension, and that's something that we want to provide. Like we want to provide a directory of extensions that people can create. So you can create an extension and share it with the rest of the people. Like say, for instance, I don't know, Kafka configuration or Kafka settings extension or something. I don't know, call it whatever you want, right? And
just trying to figure out
there you can specify whatever you want, whatever you need in order to create or to create these topics for this Terraform, for instance, templates. You can, so the Terraform template can read from there, right? Can read from this AsyncAPI definition, and therefore proceed to create a topic with the right, let's say, setup, if you want, right, or settings. But that will be an extension, clearly. Like bindings is only for connecting and for consuming and producing messages, right? Not for configuring infrastructure, right?
I think it's a fair point, though, in terms of it's can be tricky to know where the dividing line between a binding and the core spec goes, because particularly for the security settings thing I did, the first PR I did was doing it into the bindings repo, because I was sort of thinking, well, I'm talking about Kafka security settings, so it belongs in the Kafka bindings. And the feedback I got from Fran and Sergio was, well, actually, the security mechanisms I was describing, SASL, are not unique to Kafka. Therefore, they're better described in the core spec. So I closed that PR and opened a new one in the AsyncAPI repo. So I definitely am still feeling my way through this and trying to figure out what the right home for this is. So yeah, I totally agree that, understanding what lives where and what the role of the bindings is would help to have more clarity on.
And And just to clarify here, so this is our work so far, right? Actually, I will say that mostly my work so far. I've been mostly working along in the spec, so, mostly. This has been a preference of keeping the spec simple and the bindings simple, instead of them becoming a black box where everybody can throw there whatever they want, because then they will become, again, like they will become monsters, unmanageable monsters. So yeah, I just want to draw the line somewhere, and I thought like, okay, so this is about APIs, right? So it's called AsyncAPI, right? So this is about APIs in the, let's draw the line on the interface, and whatever, and that assumes that you are on the outside. If you want, you're consuming this API either for publishing or for subscribing, and there you need to put whatever it's needed for you to consume, right? But this is a community project, right? So, and I want to reinforce this, it's not set in stone. And the same way that we have now bindings, and now I'm suggesting that we move this kind of information to an extension. For some people, it might be convenient to have this kind of information somewhere else, like something that doesn't exist yet on the spec, like something like a binding, but with the purpose of configuring infrastructure, for instance, right? Like configuring topics, deploying topics, and I don't know, creating queues, all this stuff, right? It's a little bit different than the API topic itself, right? I don't want to say topic there. Where's the what is another way to describe topic?
Subject.
Subject, exactly. So it's a different thing. It's a different subject from the API stuff, right? But yeah, I agree that it can be convenient. I think the best way is to evolve naturally here, is create extensions, and the moment we see many extensions around this subject, right, then we can start thinking like, okay, so many people are using extensions for that purpose. Maybe we should create something on the core spec, right? So they're not extensions anymore, and incorporate them into the spec, into the core spec, right? But yeah, I prefer to go this way than putting too much overhead into the core spec before it's actually needed by the majority or a big amount of people, right? I hope it clarifies. Yeah.
Yeah, I had a related question, which I think chimes really well with what Dale initially outlined, and Ian's question, which is kind of what goes where. I am using a cloud provider for my Kafka, so I have I'm accessing via certificates, but also, so I've got like a key, a certificate, and also the CA to trust. So that, I mean, that's not specific to Kafka, right? We might, I don't use all of the bindings that we have, but probably that pops up in a few different places. But I couldn't quite get a handle on looking at the protocol and the type, like how I would express that in AsyncAPI. But that's quite generic, isn't it? Does this exist? Can you point me at resources, or is this something I need to think more about and propose?
Well, I think that's what Dale was working on, actually, right? Like incorporating this kind of information into the core spec when working with Kafka on the security schemes, right? So
I think the difference though is about describing the mechanism versus actually putting the credentials in the spec, and describing certificate a bit loosely as a particular type of credential.
I'm not sure I'm following you now.
So I think the difference is between what I've done is to sort of say whether or not SSL is required, but if you get to sort of say that yes, there is TLS is required, part of actually the key store, the trust store, custom CAs, anything like that, do you put those certificates in the spec as well?
Oh,
so how is OpenAPI dealing with this? Because security through TLS and such it's something that goes beyond just the async APIs. Do we have a reference of how they're dealing with that?
As far as I know, I don't think they're dealing with that, but correct me if I'm wrong. Like, you know, regarding consuming REST APIs with certificates, it's usually
Exactly.
not.
Perhaps it's going beyond the scope of the spec. You know, dealing with CA, it's like it depends if you want to use your own CA, but you will expect to be providing that CA and your
Oh,
client or your or consumer being able to handle that kind of detail because it's basically an implementation detail
yeah.
for that. That's why I don't see the Open API dealing with such a thing as CA for the HTTPS type of protocol. But I mean, we can discuss this here, right?
Yeah, I guess
Yeah.
the question really relates to if I think a major use case of something like Async API is that people will want to generate a client for, say, a server definition, the same way they do an Open API. Maybe that's not what we think will happen. Then obviously the amount the date that they would want something in the API which tells them how do I successfully generate a client that does this work, and part of that would be how do I connect to the server. So if you connect into Confluent, right, you're going to need basically to say, hey Confluent, you give me some information when I create for my API keys. You give me basically the key I need. You give me my username and password under SASL. You may tell me that actually on different platforms I have to do different things to get my certificate sorted, etc. Is that if we want to generate a client, someone can just basically go press the button, generate the client. Now I can connect to Confluent and read that information. That needs to be defined somewhere. If that's not a goal of the project, that's fine. If we think we just write some placeholder, you know, we say to people, well, you probably write a placeholder effectively, or you do it out of band, or you write an extension. But I think what needs is some clarity about how you would see that working, because a lot of the adoption of Open API has come because of the ability to define, say, a server serving topics and then generate a client. And even if the developer is not doing any kind of round tripping, at least they get started pretty fast and then they kind of move on and add stuff. And that's, I think, the question I think we're maybe reaching towards a little bit is what goes into working, what sections to help that?
My personal opinion is the spec should be able to describe enough to generate the code that will work. But in the same way that I wouldn't put a username and password into my code, I'd provide that through neighbours or something out of band from the code itself. My expectation was the spec would be similar. The description of the type of security mechanism, yes, belongs in the spec, but the actual credentials, I wouldn't put in the spec. But that's just my personal opinion. I don't know if that's I don't
think I put them in the spec either. I think that's probably quite wise. But I think that's just, it's more a rule of thumb I was thinking is that you've got to be able to figure out how to generate code from it, right?
Yeah, that is definitely my goal I want the spec to be expressive enough that there's no intuition or I don't need to guess how to get the code to work. The spec should tell me what code is needed to be able to connect and get the data off the topic.
Yeah, I agree. And actually, this is how it is working right now on OpenAPI and also on AsyncAPI with regards to HTTP authentication. It says you can clearly say that it requires user and password, but it doesn't give you the opportunity to put the user and the password there, right? Because yeah, it might be just one, or it might be dynamic. It can be connecting to a database where it's grabbing the credentials and everything, right? And regarding CA, for instance, my feeling is that this is going beyond the scope. Yeah, like I will say that you should be able to define that, I don't know, a connection requires SSL, for instance, but where do you have to go to generate this certificate or to authenticate this or verify this certificate and all this stuff? Seems to me that this is a little bit a little bit of too much, I would say, right? But yeah, happy to. I mean, if Lorna, you brought this topic into the table. So if you think that this is something that we should consider, I mean, create an issue again and let's discuss there, because yeah, meetings are very time limited and also limited in the people participating, right?
Yeah,
But
I
yeah,
also don't want to get super specific on my one question, but this has been super helpful already. Thank you, people.
Welcome.
Anything else in this topic, or shall we change this subject entirely? Okay, then Franito, let me give you
Franito,
Despacito.
Despacito,
Okay.
bonito. Well, not bonito, but
I don't even know what Despacito means, but it sounds
bonito.
nice.
Bonito is a fish.
Ah, and Despacito.
Also, it's pretty. Also, it's pretty. But I think Lucas was mentioning on Despacito. That means slowly.
Yes,
Slow
bonito is,
fish. It's
bonito
Despacito.
means pretty, but it's also fish. It's tuna. It's actually a kind of tuna. I was just trolling you, but it's true. Okay. Okay, let me just share what I have. What I want to share, just to make it clear. It's a work in progress, and I hope it's going in the right direction. So this is the result of feedback from the community, from you folks, in the past meetings, and it was about the roadmap mainly. Like, people wanted to know what's our roadmap, where are we headed to, all these kind of questions. And yeah, it might seem easy to answer, and it should be actually, but we didn't have a roadmap per se. Let's say like roadmap as in what people were expecting, like the list of tasks that we want to accomplish in the next let's say year. And so I decided to take this seriously, and it's like, no, we cannot be just moving forward without this vision, right? And reconsidering this vision that I did like 3 years ago, more or less. And I think it needs an update, right? Because things have changed since then a lot. so yeah. So the first thing that I did is, okay, so to answer the question, like, what are the next steps? I first had to answer the question myself of where are we going, right? It's like, it's not the what are the next steps, but what do we want to go, right? And so this is the vision, and I sit down quietly in my room without any any noise or anything, just thinking a lot about it, and during some days, and yeah, I came to the conclusion that it's been all the time in my head, but I never really did it. I never really wrote it. So yeah, so I wrote down this vision for the next 5 years, and I hope you share this vision, and that's why I'm sharing with you today here, so we can. So again, this is not set in stone, and we can build this together. So the vision, as it states there, is AsyncAPI becomes the #1 API specification for defining and developing APIs. Any kind of APIs. Ooh, fear, right? It's like this any kind of APIs, right? It's a short sentence, but changes everything, right? So this is 5 years from now, 2026, and that's like this is what I was trying to imagine. I was trying to imagine the perfect scenario for the user, where the user doesn't have to be switching products, tools, and workflows and everything just because one is a REST API, the other one is a gRPC API, the other one's a GraphQL API, and this one is a event-driven API or asynchronous APIs, right? So how can we make it easier for the user? And this is something that's been on my head for some time, but I wanted to write it down, and I did it. So this is the where we want to go. Let's say 5 years, and to make it possible to reach that point, I was thinking like, okay, we need some kind of goals, right? We need goals to get there, right? Like this is like a step closer, if you want. This is the vision that I have for next 5 years, and then let's get closer to the day of today, right? So what do we need to do in order to get there, generally speaking? So I set these 3 goals. I don't want to get into much detail. One of them is AsyncAPI unifies all the API specifications. I want to clarify this because I don't want you to get me wrong here. This is not about reinventing the wheel. I'm not saying this. I'm not saying that AsyncAPIs will be doing the same thing that OpenAPI is doing in a different way. Instead, what I'm saying here is that we have a great opportunity because of the binding system, precisely, specifically the HTTP binding, to link AsyncAPI and OpenAPI together. So people have been asking this for many years, like they want to use a single spec for OpenAPI and AsyncAPI, so they can create REST APIs and also even asynchronous APIs with a single document or with a single spec. That's not possible. That's not going to be possible, most probably. So instead of leaving the user with a no, with a hard no, like no, you will not be able to do that. What I'm proposing here is that we put some mechanisms into AsyncAPI to link to other specs, not just OpenAPI, right? So from AsyncAPI, it will be possible with a binding, maybe with HTTP binding. The HTTP binding itself could be the path item object of OpenAPI. If you're not familiar with OpenAPI, that's where the get, post, put, all the verbs in OpenAPI are described. This part of the OpenAPI document, and of course that will require us to improve our tooling, right? Because it will need to parse this chunk of the OpenAPI document, right? And I'm not asking people to move what they have on OpenAPI to an AsyncAPI document. Instead, using the $ref mechanism to point to another part of an OpenAPI document. And this way, users will be able to, with a single workflow, with a single tool, they will be able to work with REST APIs, with asynchronous APIs, and our toolings will be able to create a REST API, to create an asynchronous API, and in the case of GraphQL, it will be able to leverage existing tooling, not create new one, right? Leverage existing tooling like Apollo or anything to create a GraphQL API, and same for gRPC, same for other kind of APIs, right? Like this is super long-term goal, right? Again, like in 5 years from now. And I think it's a great opportunity to get there, instead of trying to tell people that a hard no, that we cannot merge all the specs and this is going to be a mess for the users. We can just provide a mechanism to link them all, right? To link them somehow, right? This will also be how do you say that? Accompanied. I don't know, like going along with another if you want initiative, which is we're gonna try to lead together with King as well, with King Lane. We're gonna try to lead a new initiative, if you want, which is like, hey, API folks, API specs folks who are working on GraphQL, on gRPC, on OpenAPI, AsyncAPI, and all the specs, right? JSON schema, Avro, and all this stuff, RAML. Let's all unite unite. You're right. So it's like, let's all at least communicate and stay in touch and share plans. And who knows, maybe share also funding. Like if some initiatives are really well funded and some others are not, like it's in the case of JSON schema, right? JSON schema is the core of AsyncAPI and OpenAPI, but they are not very well funded compared to OpenAPI and AsyncAPI. So yeah, let's just make sure that the JSON schema folks have what they need. That's contribute to a JSON schema so it improves. Same for Avro, maybe, same for gRPC, GraphQL, right? And at least let's just try to gather together and stay in touch and gather together with tooling developers, with users, and see what's needed, right? Because right now it feels to me that, oh, I mentioned Keen and now he's wanting to join the call. Then, so yeah, it's like a Beetlejuice, right? Like you mentioned 3 times and he appears. So, so yeah, the thing here is that it is not to unify all the specs. It is not to unify under a single foundation or anything. It's just to stay in touch, because it seems to me that each of the specs are working in silos, and the user, when the user wants to do stuff, API stuff, right? It's always like, yeah, you know, this tool works and this product works well with AsyncAPI, but not with GraphQL, or the other way around, or not with REST, or it's fragmented and it's a pain for the user, right? For the user experience. And so yeah, so it's just for us to try to provide a better user experience in the end. Speaking about user experience, the other goal is about API development experience. So one of the things, just to summarize it well, is we want people without prior knowledge, prior async API knowledge, to be able to create an API from idea to production, or maybe not production, but from idea to development and something that's working, right, in under 20 minutes. And that's a challenge, but we want to go there. Why we want to go there? Again, we want to put user experience, which honestly sucks right now. We want to put user experience in, you know, like top of our priority. And user experience means that people should not be necessarily learning async API the same way you don't learn how a PDF is encoded, you know, to create a PDF document, right? You go to a software, create a PDF, and share it with other software or with other people, but you don't have to know how a PDF document it's encoded inside, right? That would be insane to ask people to learn this. So, and that's what we're doing right now with OpenAPI, with AsyncAPI. We're telling people that you need to learn our spec, and in order to create stuff that's meaningful for you. But yeah, we love API specs, we love APIs, but most developers don't. So they don't want to lose time with this. It's like, no, I just want this. I just want my application to work, and you're making me lose time and making the learning curve even steeper, right? So. So yeah, this will be somehow solved, right? And especially related to the first goal, if we want to, if we really want to make it happen, the AsyncAPI community has to grow a lot, right? Because then we will not be speaking about the synchronous APIs only anymore. It will be synchronous APIs, it will be REST APIs, GraphQL, gRPC, SOAP, maybe. I hope no, but yeah, you know, you get me, you get me, right? So it's like, there's gonna be a lot of type of APIs and a lot of knowledge to share and a lot of tooling to build, and a lot of things to, you know, to do in the end, and that must be sustainable. And when I mean sustainable, this cannot be Postman, this cannot be a specific company, this cannot be the team that that is working currently full time on AsyncAPI, this needs to be something that, if eventually the community is maintaining this, only the community, it will be maintainable. So yeah, for that, it means that we'll have to make it grow insanely, right? So I hope I'm gonna stop here. I'm gonna stop on the goals for now. Do you have any questions? And then I'll continue with the roadmap, which is just an addition. Surprise, maybe.
You've got a good question from Mike in the chat.
From who? Okay. I was about to mention this, and you know, the using the word insane. And I was when I was writing this, I was like, I'm unsure to express this in English. But yeah, okay, ambitious sounds like a good thing. I mean, if all you have to say here is just wording, I'm surprised. I'll be surprised. But yeah. Proofreading services. So yeah, I'm gonna share this on the channel, on the Slack workspace. We'll share it on Twitter as well, just to reach a bigger audience. And yeah, we want to build this together. I mean, this is the vision that I think it will be awesome for the user. We might make it, we might not make it. Maybe it is too ambitious. Let's see. But for the user experience, this will be amazing to hit with a single, not with a single spec, but with a single tool, a single workflow, you can have everything. That will be amazing. And I think that in 5 or 10 or 15 years, at some point, this needs to happen, and someone needs to make the move. So why not us? Right? So yeah.
So in the chat, you have a link to the agenda, and in the agenda there's a link to this preview and also a PR on which you can leave, and would be awesome if you can leave comments and suggestions.
Yeah, let's just leave it there for people to think about it, because I think it's been like a lot of information in short time. And the other thing is more about the format rather than the content. It's about the roadmap, right? What people are looking for in a roadmap. So I'm not a product person, I'm a developer. It's my first time doing this kind of product stuff, if you want, product roadmap. And yeah, it's like it's been confusing to me, because I've been confusing release plans with roadmaps. Release plans is, you know, like list of tasks that people can just take and do and solve. But that's honestly, it's impossible to maintain. You know, this kind of roadmap is impossible to maintain, because it's, you know, it's a release plan, and I cannot foresee what we'll be doing in 3 months from now. I mean, at the task detail. I mean, you know, so it's that we tried first in the past, but that's unmaintainable. Instead, what we do is that every 6 weeks we propose this tasks, if you want, right? More detailed. That's what we call the shape app. Not what we call, it's actually not our name. So it's here.
Sorry, in a call, it was a couple of months ago maybe, Clemens was asking about the distinction between an org based around the spec and an org based around code, tools and generating and such. And you mentioned about that one way you saw it going is that there would be a separate steering group or board or governance or whatever, the spec and the code. Do you think that the same would be helpful for like the roadmap and the goals, to have this is the roadmap for stuff like code generation and the gateway and what have you, and then the spec separately?
Well, first of all, I don't think we're gonna do this separate committees anymore. We've been, I'm just spoiling a little bit what Lucas is going to talk about next, but yeah. And regarding having them separately, the problem is that we don't have a release plan. We don't have that level of detail up front, right? Like, we don't know what's going to happen after 6 weeks. We only plan for the next 6 weeks, because we're always every 6 weeks we are reconsidering, let's say, what's next for us to do in order to meet the roadmap, right? To go in the direction that we set, and whatever is a good idea today, it might not be a good idea in 2 months from now. So maybe just because someone else discovers something else and we think it's a better idea, and then it changes everything, right? So we never planned that. We have issues though. We have issues among a lot of repos, and that are free. I'm just want to mention that this is the roadmap for the team who's working full time on AsyncAPI, right? This is the direction that we want to take. This is the direction. If you want, you can join us, of course, and follow the same direction. But the community doesn't have to be tied to a specific roadmap, right? You might solve something that it's important for you, but maybe not for the majority, right? So you have your own priorities, other people have their own priorities. This is just like the bulk of the people working on AsyncAPI full time. This is the direction that we're going to take, right? And I think it's important because in the end, it's full time working on this. A bunch of people. It's we can accomplish much more than just occasional contributions. Of course, it's understandable. That's why. And yeah, I don't know. So this is more about the format. Like I said, this is not a release plan. It's more like if you look at the text that's written there on the roadmap, it's never saying we're gonna do this or we're gonna do X or Y. It's more describing a state, if you want, like a future state, like a user can make sure only well-formed messages reach the broker without having to touch a single line of code. How are we going to do this? It's not described there. This is what we want the user, in this case, this is what the state of the tooling and the state of the user experience, how we want it to be. Then there are many ways to do this. There can be frameworks, there can be a proxy that will do this for you. There can be a tool that will validate stuff in the middle. There are many solutions, or all of them. But the thing here is that we want to get there, right? It's like we want to get there, and we'll try to get there using our best, using our I don't know how to express this. Like we're gonna try to use our time in the best way possible to get there, right? And that means that every 6 weeks we're gonna reconsider. We still want to get there, right? So what's best now? What can we build that will take us there, where we want to go, right? So this is more about direction all the time, not specific tasks, right?
Okay, not much time left.
No, sorry.
No worries. So just to actually, I think, to conclude the question from Dave, and just somehow jump into the governance topic. So the thing is that the good news is that on our, like, me and Fran finished working on this topic already Monday last week. And we handed over the charter, and for those like me who are not native English, charter is not a person that creates charts. That's what I've learned about open governance. So we finished working on the charter and handed over to the foundation, just waiting for their green light if we can share it with the community, and at the same time work with them on some wording fixes, because as we shared last time, it's me and Fran, and we are not super professional lawyers and writers as well, and not native speakers. So we
Really?
definitely
We are insanely good.
insanely good.
Sorry, Mike.
But I hope that it's gonna happen really soon. I took a challenge to also describe in a blog post the motivation behind the governance model. So when we will share a PR to AsyncAPI repo with the charter, at the same time we're gonna release a blog post that briefly explains the motivation, so you can help us out looking on the charter, giving us feedback, saying like, nah, that's not matching, your wording is wrong. So that would be awesome if you can validate us. But briefly, the idea is, and that's why it's taking so much time for a review from a foundation, is that we took a different approach there. So we basically always wanted to give back to community, and like, it's not just us working here, it's community working on the spec. So basically, like, the overall idea for the governance model is that the power is in the people that work on the project. So whoever is a regular committer has a right to vote whenever there's a topic that needs voting, of course. So the technical steering committee for now is one, not as we thought that it's going to be two, simply because while we started working on the charter, we kind of noticed that it's already going to be overwhelming for the community to hand over one steering group, and like thinking about separating, have one for tooling, one for spec, we simply thought it's going to be it's going to be way too complicated to handle, because we're not yet at such a big scale with the community to be able to handle that. So we thought, like, let's start small, and then of course nothing stops us from splitting the committees at some point of time if it makes sense, if we really if like really spec and tooling is a super different world. But yeah, we wanted to start small, so it's going to be one committee, and but of course over time we can vote over a change, but we want to make changes based on our experience and not trying to invent. That's the idea here. But yeah, more will be in the charter, more in the like summary of the charter in the blog post, hopefully this week. And it's 6, but just to mention, if you were looking for PHP or Go templates, so there's a PHP template that was donated by Emiliano, who joined our community recently, and he created a template for PHP. It's already in AsyncAPI. He wants to work with the community on the template. So in the agenda, there's a link if you're interested. And the other one, quite important status, because there was a Go template repo in the organization for quite some time. There was a work started by Jacob, but unfortunately he could not continue on it. But he created already a super first version of the template. So Emiliano and Takumi, two different guys, showed up saying that they would like to contribute and help out to continue work. So we merged Jacob's work, and we're continuing the work, so it's not stale anymore. So the Go template work continues, and the link to the template is also in the agenda. So it's 1:00, but if you have some questions before we leave, at least I can stay longer. And Fran, maybe some question.
Just around timescale, do you know roughly, when the next steps will happen? What's happening next?
In regards to the open governance and foundation,
yeah.
So it's like we didn't get yet an answer from the foundation, so we're not sure if they're just busy with different stuff, or we wrote such a bad charter that they need more time to review. But for me, it's like we tried to rush them today if we can just not be blocked by their review and already hand over review to you. And like I was thinking that we should at least give you 2 weeks to have a look, to read what we have, because that's a bigger topic that you should have a look at. And at the same time, we can discuss stuff with the foundation. So not sure what you're thinking, Fran, if you have already some deadlines in your head. But like last time we had deadline that we complete the work on the open governance by the end of February. So we managed to do it.
Yeah.
Now it's just that the thing is that it's not everything now on us. We just need to wait for the paperwork.
Exactly. So the thing here is that the ball is not on our roof right now, right? So we cannot guarantee any deadlines. What we can guarantee is that we already did whatever we have to do, at least on the charter side. I'm also working on the legal side, IP transfer and what's the other thing? IP transfer and trademarks, domains, all this stuff. At the same time, this can be these things are parallelized, but yeah, it's not all on us. I don't think this is gonna take longer than this month. I mean, it shouldn't, but yeah, again, it's not on our roof. So yeah.
But also we don't have to wait for for some final signature to kick off. So once we have a model, like I said, in 2 weeks, we're all happy with what we have. Foundation is happy. Then I mean, we're not going to wait for some final paperwork. We can already kick off and start set up and slowly grow. And
yeah, sure. We as soon as we share the charter and the way we want to work, we can already start working this way. I mean, there's no need to wait for, like Lucas said, right? But yeah, if Dale, if you're asking because maybe IBM wants to jump into the project in a more, let's say, not legal, but in a more official way, then yeah, it will have to wait. I mean, we know that also Microsoft is waiting for this too, and probably not sure yet if Salesforce are waiting for this move to a foundation, to a neutral ground. Not necessarily that we work in a way or another. They don't care. It's more about the IP and trademarks and patents and all this stuff.
Yeah, I mean, that's fine. Like you've seen, I'm happy to start helping with the Kafka side of the spec in parallel.
Thanks.
Perfect. Okay, so I guess it's time to say goodbye. So that was a exhausting meeting, and with so many people. Thanks a lot for joining. Recording, don't expect it today. So tomorrow I'm gonna share recording with you, and hopefully in next days the open governance model. Thanks again for joining, and ciao in 2 weeks.
Ciao. Thank you. Bye.
Thanks. Bye, everyone.